it's me, Courtney, and welcome to my channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the new Artist Couture Supreme Nudes palette. This is what the actual palette looks like. This palette does cost $40. You get 12 shades total. You get 8 mattes, 3 shimmers, and honestly, you do get a 4th shimmer. However, it kind of rings a little bit more metallic glitter than shimmer, if that makes sense. It does come with a nice size mirror. The entire palette itself is plastic and it is a magnet closure. It's super duper thin, so it's easy to travel with. I actually really like the way this palette is set up. It is a little bit weighty. It's not as weighty as, say, a Pat McGrath, you know, eyeshadow palette, but it does have a little weight to it. So it doesn't feel like cheap or anything. It feels luxurious. It looks luxurious. I love the packaging. Now, this is not the first palette that Artist Couture has come out with. They did come out with like a little smaller mini palette. I believe it was called the Midnight Maven palette, if I'm not mistaken. I never got that palette just because it came out around the same time as the Dominique Cosmetics Celestial Storm palette, and I ended up going with the Celestial Storm palette just because I felt like I got more variety out of that, if that makes sense. So this is the first time that I'm actually trying out the Artist Couture formula for their eyeshadows, and I really like it. I feel like this is one of those palettes where online, again, it does not do it justice. The colors in this palette are absolutely gorgeous. They're even more gorgeous on the eye. I was really nervous about these 3 right here just because I felt like sometimes cool tones don't necessarily translate, especially if they're of the lighter variety on my skin tone or deeper. But with that being said, using a tacky base does help these colors to be a little bit more saturated on your skin tone. For me, I can use my regular concealer, or you know, the Fenty primer if you wanted to use that, or the Urban Decay eyeshadow primer. Any primer that you want to use, if you just leave it tacky and then try to use some of these shades, they'll show up a lot better. Now, with all that being said, I do feel like the mattes in this palette are super duper blendable, super duper easy to use. If you're a beginner to eyeshadow, I feel like this palette is an easy one. Now, you are gonna have a little bit of fallout. Definitely not as much as like an Anastasia Beverly Hills palette, but you do get a little bit, especially with this shade right here, which we'll get into in a second. But as far as the mattes go, they are soft and finely milled. I wouldn't necessarily call them buttery. I've had palettes that are a little bit more movable, a little bit more buttery, that kind of thing, but they are very soft. All the mattes in this palette are very buildable, so especially when it comes to the shades that I was talking about earlier, you can definitely continue to build those up if you want a little bit more from those shades. But when it comes to shades like this one, the Mink color, it is really rich, really deep. However, I feel like I would have preferred maybe a darker blackish brown, just because sometimes when I want to do a really smoked out look, I go a little bit darker than this. And if you are of a deeper complexion, I feel like a little bit darker would have been even better, so you can really get that smoky look, so you can really deepen whatever look that you create with this, if that makes sense. But even with all of that, I still feel like the palette is super saturated, super beautiful colors. When it comes to the shimmers, they definitely shimmy. It's interesting because they're not like my regular super duper creamy, super almost moist shimmer shades that I like. The ones that when you put your finger in it, it kind of moves around a little bit, like they're really creamy, really buttery, those kind. These shimmers aren't necessarily like that. They're more of a powder formula, but they still go on super duper metallic. As you can see right here, this shade is Lavish, which is literally, I think, my favorite shade in this palette. It's one of those things where you're not gonna ruin your shadow when you have to put your finger in it. Like, it's very solid. It's pressed really well, and it gives just the most beautiful sheen. Look at that. But you do have like your Bronziana and your Supreme in here, which they're not super duper reflective, but they do pack a punch. They still have a shimmy to it, but it's not necessarily in your face like the Lavish color is, but it's still beautiful. It's still very soft on the lid, and I love the fact that they blend easily with the mattes, but the shimmers also blend in with each other, so you can really melt them together to create one whole eye look without it looking like too stark, like this is one color and this is another color, if that makes sense. So the only shade in this palette that I really like have a love-hate relationship with is this color Opulence right here. It is a beautiful copper shade. It's uber metallic, as you guys can see. However, it's almost like a glitter in that as much fallout as you would get from glitter, I get that amount of fallout with that shade, which is crazy because when you look at it, it is very opaque altogether. And again, it has a crazy amount of beautiful reflect. Even on the eye, just it smooths itself out. It's not super duper heavy or super chunky feeling, like it feels good. Doesn't feel gritty or anything on the eye, but for whatever reason, the particles of this shade just continue to fall out. I was able to clean it up a little bit more today. However, just in general, I've had a few problems with that shade. But again, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not mad at it still. I only have that love-hate relationship because it has all that fallout, because it's almost like a glitter. You don't need a glitter glue necessarily, it'll still stick to the eye, but I would recommend if you're gonna get this palette and use that shade, make sure you do your eyeshadow first. Or if you're somebody that likes to do your face first and then put your eyeshadow on, I would recommend putting down a ton of powder. Otherwise, it's gonna get all over your face and it's gonna be a little frustrating. Again, I still love it. I'm still gonna use it. I'm down for it. However, just be mindful that that shade is probably the most fallout you will get out of this entire palette. All in all, I feel like this palette is such a beautiful palette, and if you're somebody that really loves nudes, or you like browns, you like bronzes, you like golds, this palette is it. I feel like it's a really good everyday palette, but you definitely get your smoky sort of nighttime vibes from this palette as well. It's definitely one of those palettes where you can tap your brush in one time and build your pigment as you go. But if you are somebody that likes to sort of rush it a little bit and tap in 2 or 3 times and then kind of get that pigment on, you can do that as well. If you need your cool tones, you have that. You got your warm tones, you got your shimmers. I feel like this palette is really well rounded. However, the only thing that I would have added was a deeper blackish brown sort of shade, even deeper than this shade. Aside from that, I feel like this palette is gorgeous. As you guys may have guessed, I am here for the Supreme Nudes palette again. If you guys were interested in it, I would definitely say pick it up. If you are curious about any of the products that are on my face, as usual, I will make sure I leave that in the description box below. And I think that about does it for me, guys. Hopefully this video was helpful, entertaining, and fun. If so, please give me a thumbs up. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video if it's in your heart to do so, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.